And welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. So, this time, what I am thinking I am going to try to do is I am going to try and do a sample return mission from the moon. We have this Moon of 4 contract that's going to sit here taking up space for quite a while. So I'm going to try and do that. I am also going to try and land at one of those other sites while I'm doing it. I'm not really too sure how that's going to come out, but we'll find out. So let's take a quick review of where we are in the tech tree. Looks like we're getting pretty far along. Alright, so a sample return mission is kind of interesting in Kerbal Space Program. I have a basic design that I always like to use for these types of missions where I do like an automated science return. So let me get this assembled. The basic idea is going to be exactly what this looks like. We're going to just make ourselves a little return capsule. Okay. So we're doing good there. We'll get some extra electric power. We need a heat shield. So we got a little heat shield. Sometimes, you know, if I'm using a parts mod that has better parachutes, sometimes I'll put a heat shield on both ends just in case it tumbles, because that unfortunately does happen sometimes. And we need communications. So there's our comms. Oh, no, not that one. Okay. Alright, decent. Moon 4. Oh, no, we already did that. This will actually be Moon 5. I forgot we had some satellites that were getting ahead of the contract series, but that's okay. Alright, and so what we're going to want to do is make sure we get our science container selected. Group 1 is going to just collect all the science as we did before. So now we need our direct ascent return stage. Because a science return mission like this, you can do this as like, you know, a lunar orbit rendezvous kind of a thing. But in all honesty, there's no need. You just do a direct ascent and it works fine. Alright, so that'll give us a little bit of boost there. That'll be our kickoff. Okay. So now, there we go. That really should have enough delta V to get us back from the surface of the moon. It should. But I don't know, maybe it'll get stranded. I'll find out. Yeah, see, I mean, I can do some extra stuff like this, and as a matter of fact, I just might. Yeah, that's actually going to be worth it, I think. Because part of the challenge is keeping this whole thing in a relatively small diameter, right? Because I want it to be able to fit inside of payload fairings, and in addition to fitting inside of payload fairings, I want to be able to, like, this science module is a huge part. It's a huge part. And I want to try and make sure that it's not going to, like, get in the way. And that's tough to do, because it is a huge part. I mean, look at that. That's You know, unless I want this landing stage to be exceptionally tall, I'm going to have to clip a bunch of crap into there. I mean, it's a huge part. There's no other way to put it. And before I forget, I'm going to put my little Kerbal engineer spots inside of my return stage. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to get a little bit of extra science up on top of here. Going to just do some science things. Alright, so that can all be returned, and that'll be our stage there. So now, yeah, I mean, even that is enormous. It's so tall. I mean, I hate to do this much part clipping, but it's just so tall. And that's got 20, well, I mean, that really should be enough, but just in case, yeah, you know what? Just for good measure, I'm gonna use these. Because these have a gimbal on them anyway. We'll try this. And we'll do our landing legs. And that is also going to serve as our like launch platform. You know, very similar to like what was done with Apollo and the Lunokhod. Not Lunokhod. Yeah, they were just regular Luna missions. The Soviet sample returns that used the lander like as a launch pad for the return stage. So let's take another quick look. All right, let's get those a little bit lower. There we go. That looks better. And last thing I'm going to want to do is some more electricity. Very much some more electricity. I'm going to want to get a couple of solar panels down here. And I would really like to get some lights. I like to use those larger floodlights, but at the same time, I also want to do, you know, I want to have a decoupler on there. So, all right, that'll have to do. One thing I am thinking, though, is to do some RCS blocks. Because what I'm worried about, like what I'm thinking right now is this is on its way down to the surface. I want to have some rotational control to make sure that we're landing upright. And the gyro in the probe core is not going to be especially powerful. However, the RCS down here are going to be they're going to have a very hard and difficult angle of moment relative to the center of gravity. So I think I'll put these up here, and I'll just put some monopropellant down in the bottom stage, because I want to keep the center of gravity like as low as possible. But that's hard to do. Yeah, it's not ideal, but it'll have to do. Oh, no, actually, wait a minute. You know what I can even do? I can take it in a different direction. Yeah. Yeah, that should work. Okay. All right, so now let's make sure we've got a good trans stage going, which should be relatively easy. This will provide us a generous amount of delta V. I mean, that's a lot of delta V right there for something this light. And just for a little bit of good measure, I'm going to put some extra monopropellant in there. Okay, so there is our craft. Let's get our booster going. Do we have any booster designs that are 1.85 or higher? We do not. So we're going to be building one. Let's make sure that this will fit in a 1.875. Come on, snap. Okay, close enough. 4 sides. We'll go with the silver top, just because why not? And we definitely want to auto strut that. And just for extra safety, as I like to do, we'll do some manual struts inside the fairing. Not bad. Now we just need to get that to the moon. And that shouldn't be super difficult. Yeah, those are relatively good engines. Oh, you know what? Let's make it look cool. There we go. All right, now is where we're going to get a little creative. Huh? What's this? We're going to build this out a little bit like the Proton. Okay, not bad. Now let's get... and we'll clip these in a bit. Nice. Now, what I'm going to do, just to make extra sure that our fuel is flowing correctly, we're going to do a fuel line and then just cover it with those aerodynamic fairings. And we'll give ourselves some extra control surfaces just for good measure. And presuming this booster works, I'll save that for later. Because that's, assuming this works correctly, that should be a relatively robust kind of design. Alright, so let's get going. We'll save Muna 4. and see how we do. Come on. All right. And we are almost in our correct launch orientation, so not bad. F5 for safety. Okay, thrust to weight ratio is a little low, but it works. Alright, good. We're draining properly there. Good. Fuel flow is looking adequate. There is a chance I'll have to redesign this a little bit and add a 7th engine on the center line and do a little bit more fuel up above. That thought had occurred to me while I was in the design process there, and having 2 directional fuel lines just to make sure that the fuel flow is going even. I know that that's not usually necessary. I know that. So I can hear you furiously typing the comment, "You don't need to do that." I know. I do it for peace of mind. So we're doing okay. Ascent is a little bit slower than I would prefer, but we'll see what we get. Come on, get up there. See, right now, going up, I'm just watching the apoapsis. With this sort of a design, I usually try to get past the Kármán line there in the first stage. So I try to get to, an apoapsis of at least 70,000 in the first stage, so that the second stage is burning in 0 atmosphere. Alright, so we're doing okay. I'm more optimistic than I was 10 seconds ago. We're just evening out our trajectory there. What's our altitude looking like? Alright, we're just about... Alright, now we're in space. We'll ditch our fairing. And just because we can, just in case we had any stray contract, I don't think we did, but just in case we had a stray contract to return science to Kerbal from space around Kerbal, that would complete it and get the quick funding. I do that as a habit I got into a long time ago, of just doing temperature scans everywhere I go, just in case I have a lingering contract for a little bit of extra money that I had, not remembered. So looking now, I'm actually getting a little worried about this trans stage. That should be a pretty healthy amount of delta V, but we're running low on fuel. Lower than I would like anyway. Alright, we'll get our intercept. That isn't the problem. Now let's make sure we're oriented. Alright, good. We're oriented to get some solar power. Oop. Did I miss? I think I did. Yep. That was some good human error on my part. Alright, what now? I'm pretty sure we've all done that. My eyes focused up here to the left to the time scale, away from the orbital plane here. So we're just gonna time warp and orbit around Kerbal for a month, and hope we can get another lucky intersect. All right, good. That's going to be a weird intercept. But at least it'll take us, like, low to the surface. Alright, and we should... How are we doing for control? We've still only got that one satellite. I don't think we're going to get there, but it would have been nice to land at that monolith. But I think at this point I am beyond the point of no return in terms of, like, choosing my landing spot. Okay, so this stage ended up having a good amount of delta V. I worried there for a second, but it worked out okay. So now this is our primary descent stage, as intended so far. And we're on the day side, so I'm not going to need those lights, but I like to use them anyway, even when they're not strictly necessary. So what we're doing here, if you're new to Kerbal Space Program, or if you're new to like space mission terminology, this is called a suicide burn, where we set ourselves up on like a one-way trajectory. We didn't bother coming down into orbit or anything like that. We're not doing like, we didn't do like some slow controlled descent. We're just aiming ourselves like straight at the ground and just using, just burning our engine thrust to slow down. I don't do that too often with crewed missions that have, crew members on board. But with a probe like this, the margin of risk is relatively low. Yeah, this is actually working out really well. When I'm doing my custom mod set that I use, I mentioned it in the comments to one or two other videos. My normal playthrough that I do in KSP, I use a mod set that I developed myself based on a few other mods that are out there that converts the Kerbal Space Program career mode into the Soviet space program. So it's using like the Soyuz capsules. It's got like like the Sputnik probe cores, parts to make like some of the Soviet themed missions and stuff. And that mod that I made there, it uses a custom tech tree, so it kind of forces you to do like some sample return stuff like this before you do landings on the moon with any crew. And it's gotten me accustomed to doing this sort of a mission before for science. But, with the default tech tree, it's not necessary. I mean, it's almost a downgrade to switch over to a mission like this. Alright, so now... Oh yeah, we've got an enormous thrust to weight ratio at the moment, so we're all good. We'll put our lights on just because we can. We're all good for a very safe landing. Look at that. Right at around 1 meter per second. That is as gentle of a touchdown as it gets. Oh no, that's not the button I wanted. Whoops. Alright, so we're going to F5 for safety, just in case I make some colossal mistake. Alright, we're going to grab all of our science. That's going to be a good, healthy amount of science off of this return mission. Alright, and we will take all that. Now, here's the dilemma. Do I use the Delta V I have in my final stage there to get me part of the way, to like lift off and get part of the way back to Kerbal? Or do I use this as the launch pad as intended? Because I'm not entirely sure how much Delta V this stage is going to have, I think I'm going to get myself going. Because we still had, as you saw, we still had a significant amount of Delta V left in that stage. Alright, so now we've got those SRBs, the Separatrons. I use those for this sort of a thing right there very frequently. Alright, so now we're on our regular engine. Unfortunately, we are carrying a little bit of dead weight. We're carrying the dead weight of the two Separatrons and the dead weight of these RCS parts, but that's not a lot. And it's looking like we should have a really good margin of error on Delta V. This is healthy. This is very healthy. Look at that. All right. All right, so we're actually even going to be able to get down into like a lower Kerbal orbit and use some Delta V and a little bit of a retro burn just to slow, to lower our apses a bit more. So we're going to lower our apps. And the idea with this, I may or may not have mentioned, having done this in some of the other missions, the idea with what we're doing here, this heat shield and everything probably has more than enough ablator, ablative heat shield, to land safely, but I frequently like to do a shallow re-entry when possible, and the reason is, if my return module here tumbles on re-entry and the heat shield ends up not being, head-on for the entire re-entry, there's going to be less heat damage to the rest of those parts, and there's a better chance that the return module might survive re-entry without the heat shield, or without the heat shield for the whole thing. So not strictly necessary, but like a lot of the things I do in Kerbal Space Program, it's just for the extra margin of safety. Because again, I'm only using F5 save states for like Kraken insurance. So I'm not cheating for this series. So if I blow something up, it's blown up. So because of that, I am absolutely trying to maintain a little bit of extra safety. And I should have just... Okay, good. We've got comms from Kerbal 2. That'll be providing us... yeah, that'll bounce to 5, to 4. Okay. Just making sure that we're going to have control over this probe as we're going down for re-entry. Minor detail, right? Actually being able to orient this thing correctly as we're going in. And I'm just going to burn that last bit of Delta V that I've got. Okay, moment of truth. Now we got to get all this juicy science back down safely. This is always the harrowing part of the reentry. Now I've used, a probe like this or substantially similar to this a good number of times, and the center of gravity is usually correct to keep this oriented properly. I have occasionally run into issues where, like, I did some antennas or the RCS and there was some extra drag and it like flipped and tumbled and got all stupid. But it looks like we worked okay this time. That's good to see. And oh wow, look at that word. Kerbal 2 is not even helping us out. We're going all the way back to Moona 2. Well, okay then. And we're going to F5 for a Kraken insurance on the parachute. Switch to AGL. Not bad. And that should be... Yep, that should be getting us a nice sample return mission. We do have to ride the parachute down all the way, though, where it's the only one I can't cut it and just drop. Not from 300 meters. From, like, 20 meters, might be like, alright, I'll drop it. But from this far, playing it safe. Yeah, barely used any ablator. And again, that was the advantage of, doing that extra burn to lower our periapsis. We came in really slow, had a very gentle re-entry. And that whole recovery went very smooth. That was good to see. I really like that design for that return capsule. So if you're doing, like, unmanned science return missions, like flying out to Joule or something like that, or some other similar thing, feel free to copy that design. Because as you just saw, that works extremely well, clipping the science return capsule down into the Octo probe core there. Alright, so now we've got 300 science. Where are we going? This is tempting. Larger boosters are tempting. Larger fairings are tempting, but don't need them yet. Don't need any of that yet. Getting science to get up here is tempting. The atmospheric fluid spectrovariometer can produce a good amount of science, but the problem is, in order to use that correctly, like if this wasn't for a video series and I was just doing like offline career mode, at this point I would go with scanning tech. I would take that and I would do a ton of aviation missions flying all over Kerbal, collecting that science from every frickin' biome I could, landing everywhere, flying everywhere, like just with Netflix or something going on my second monitor. But that takes an enormous amount of time. So the other option, and I'm thinking this is probably where I'm going to go, is going to be for electronics. And there's a couple of reasons. So this RA-15 relay antenna ends up being extremely important long-term. The magnetometer boom and the double C seismic accelerometer are both extremely important and can start getting me extra science returns on my very next mission. Whereas advanced electronics is primarily going to be for these solar panels and this battery, which are going to be more important on unmanned probes. However, my next series of unmanned probes, I think I'm going to be waiting until I've got the RA-15 anyway. So that's going to kind of be the no-brainer for me, I think. Alright, so now, let's clear out our contract there. Oh, wait a minute, did we not get... We didn't get credit. Why is that? That might actually be an error in the contract. Huh. Um... Hmm. Oh, no. Yeah, it's an error in the contract. It wanted it recovered from the moon and recovered from Kerbal. So that is an error in the contract configuration. I will have to go back and fix that after the words. So please don't hate me. I'm going to have to cheat out that contract. But you guys all saw me complete it. So, alright, we cheated out that contract, but we completed it at least in spirit. Alright, so now we're going to start doing more regular missions to the moon. Okay, this is lucrative. Flyby of Minmus. So, and that's a 3-star contract. So I'm going to grab that just for now, even though we're not actually going to do it yet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on a two crew capsule to replace our Akatosh design. So the idea here is I'm gonna use this. We're gonna do like an launch up to Kerbal orbit. Make sure that this works out okay. Grab some EVA science from some biomes we don't have. Maybe put this into a polar orbit. Make sure that like our hatches aren't blocked or anything like that. Whoops. And presuming everything works okay with this design, where we'll go from there is we'll use this as the basis for a direct ascent profile landing on the moon. That'll be the end goal, so to speak. I just don't like the way that came out looking. Alright, that's better. Whoops. Clampatron Jr. There we go. Alright, we'll get our heat shield. Whoops. Going to want to make sure we have a decoupler for this. And just to make sure that we're placing that correctly, I always do what you saw me do there. And now, what I like to do this design has a number of advantages. So later on, I can put those retracting solar panels up here under the fairing. But for now, it'll just be some of these mounted out externally. So I'm thinking ahead. The other thing that I like to do is I can put some of these down under there And it doesn't look too terrible. I think that looks okay. And then, like later on, our solar panels can be on the diagonals there. And that puts our center of gravity in a good spot to get some RCS thruster blocks. Sort of right near the center of gravity. So I really like this design. I've used something similar to this many times, and I'm a big fan of it. This right here has enough delta V to get us back from like orbit around the moon or orbit around Minmus with plenty of delta V to spare. This on its own almost has enough delta V to get us back from the surface of the moon. If we put some of those Sepratron rockets on here, it'll definitely have enough delta V to get us back. So this is a very adaptable design that I end up using for a lot of stuff. And we're going to call this... We'll call this Zenithar 1. And there's a non-zero chance you've picked up on my naming convention by now. Alright, so now, as a proof of concept, let's get Zenithar 1 into orbit around Kerbal. Now, in true stock fashion, I'm going to kind of try and let this design be inspired by Gemini and the Titan II. Not bad. Actually, you know what we'll do? Just for fun, we'll use the cool looking decoupler there. Whoop. There we go. Okay. Now let's get some fins going for a bit of extra stability. When in doubt, clip fins are the secret. Alright, so let's see what we get. Oh, let's get some crew. Now, because we have a two-person crew, we can start sending up these other Kerbals who are not pilots. We can send up, like, you know, Bill and Bob if he hadn't already gone up in the Akatosh with the probe core. So now we have a little bit more flexibility with our crew. And this is just a test flight. Just a test flight to evaluate the delta V of our booster primarily. So F5 for Kraken Insurance. And of course, as mentioned at the beginning of episode 1, one of the mods I am running increases the thrust of this engine very slightly, just to make this sort of a design viable. You know, it bothered me a lot when the Making History DLC expansion pack came out, that they included the engine and like parts to make a really good-looking Titan II Gemini type of a stack. But the first stage engine didn't have anywhere near enough thrust to get the thing off the ground. That bothered me so much. It was such a letdown. So, as a result of that, I end up just doing a little bit of a light mod to increase the thrust on that engine a bit. Nothing serious, nothing game-breaking, nothing cheating. At least not cheating too bad. Alright, so because this mission is only going to low Kerbal orbit, we don't need to get above the Kármán line on the first stage. We just really need to get about halfway there. And this stage should provide us a fair amount of delta V. And that top stage, of course, has an enormous amount of delta V. So we're very healthy there. And presuming this test flight works out okay, and it's looking like it's going to, I'll probably do one more into a polar orbit, just to get the EVA from some of those oddball biomes. Yeah, we're looking really good on the delta V. Because if I can get that top stage, like, yeah, even up to like 90 or 100, I mean, yeah, that's golden. That thing's got a ridiculous amount of power. Now, just to do a little bit of extra flight testing, let's do some translation. Look at that. We're not wobbling or spinning. That is like right on the center of gravity. Love to see it. And the reason we're testing that out is so that we can use this Zenithar design for docking later on, or if we want to do like a space station or something, so we can use this as a crew ferry. So that's why I always like to test that if it's a design that I'm going to be using for any kind of advanced docking stuff. Oh man, look at all this delta V. Beautiful. Alright, let's send Reyes out on a spacewalk. Yeah, Kerbal's water. We've already got plenty of science from that. Alright. EVA above the highlands, which we do not have. Good. Alright, so we're at least going to get a little science. And this worked out relatively well. So, now what I'll do, after we recover this, we'll send up another mission launched from probably Glacier Lake into a polar orbit. And we'll be doing a polar orbit and just collecting science from doing an EVA above all the biomes. Or at least most of the major biomes, like the polar caps and stuff. I'm not going to... If the orbit doesn't line up very well, I'm not going to spend, 40 minutes going around orienting for, the Badlands and all that. I am foregoing a small amount of efficiency and completeness just for the sake of this being a video series. Alright, so here's our reentry. This is a fairly basic capsule design. It should be balanced relatively well. Spinning a little bit just because we can. Because why not? A little bit of rotation's always fun. Just make the crew a little dizzy. You know, and in reality, that would be an extremely bad idea, but close enough for Kerbals. Kerbals are significantly more resistant to, like, you know, inertia, extreme g-forces, acceleration, deceleration, rotational force. They're far more resilient than humans are. Doing good on the ablator. This should be an extremely safe sort of a design, and I'll probably end up getting a significant amount of reuse out of this. Sometimes when I'm doing a career mode, I'll tend to favor using the one-man capsule to push out like all the way into min-miss stuff before worrying about the moon. Just because it's, you know, min-miss is so much smaller, its gravity is far more forgiving. You need a lot less delta V to enter orbit, to escape orbit, even to land. You know, it's been a popular thing in Kerbal Space Program for a long time to do min-miss before the moon. Just because you can safely do, you know, landing and return missions and orbits and EVAs and everything else with a lot less delta V, a lot lower in the tech tree. So sometimes I will do that. But again, for the sake of this series, you know, I'm going a little bit more conventional, going to the moon first. All right, so that worked out extremely well. There is one thing I realize I forgot. I forgot to set a control group for the science container to collect all of the science. Minor detail. Okay. Alright, and have all of our Kerbals flown into space? They have. Do we need any more designated victims? Not so stupid, not so brave. That's always good to see on a scientist. And I like to have 2 of each, so I'll go with 1 of him. And not so stupid, extremely brave. That is good on a pilot. So is that, yeah, it's a girl pilot. We'll go with her. Alright. So there is our next crew. And this should keep us relatively good for Kerbals for a while. Okay. Alright, we'll go from Crater Lake, and we'll see about going up into a polar orbit. Launching into a polar orbit does take a little bit more delta V than a regular equatorial orbit. Kerbal Space Program kind of nerfs the assent a little bit in giving you the Kerbal Space Center that is like directly on the equatorial plane without any latitude or anything like that. So it's as good as it can get in terms of like delta V to orbit and everything. Whereas in reality, you know, French Guiana, I think, is the closest launch site on Earth to the equator. But, you know, like the United States launching out of Florida or California or Texas, or like the Soviets and the Russians launching out of Baikonur and Plastek, or like the Chinese off of Hainan and all that. There, you know, it takes a lot more delta V to get into orbit from one of those launch sites where it's inclined a bit. Oh, and did I launch from... Oh, I launched from Crater Lake instead of Glacier. Instead of Glacier Lake. Oh, well. Oh, alright, that's fine. Up we go. Do it live! What's the worst that can happen? As long as I can get that top stage up above the Kármán line, which I absolutely can. I've got more than enough Delta V to fix it later. So that will not be a significant problem. And I'm just straightening that out a little bit so it's a little bit more of a direct polar orbit once we get up there. Good, good, good. Looking very healthy. So do a little bit of a warp, get a bit closer to our apoapsis, do our orbital insertion burn, there we go. Alright, tons of Delta V to spare, good healthy polar orbit. So now comes the fun part. Fun in quotes here. Alright, so now we're going to be trying to get an EVA report from all these different biomes. Alright, we got highlands in the last one. We should be coming up on tundra or polar caps. Perfect. We grab that quick because the tundra goes by real fast. Cruds. See? It went by so quick. And Northern Ice Shelf is a separate biome. Somehow. For some reason. And not going to get any tundra here, I don't think. Alright, we might get some tundra on the southern polar ice cap. We'll see. Alright, see where we are. Where did our orbit take us? Oh, you know, we could have even got that over the Badlands. The Badlands are generally like, it's the most remote biome on Kerbal, so it tends to get visited the least and have the lowest quotient of science returned from it out of all the biomes on Kerbal, because it's in a weird spot in terms of your orbital trajectory. An equatorial orbit will not strictly take you over it. At least I don't think it does. So you've got to rely on doing like a polar orbit and just flying around a whole bunch. Watching for mountains. Mountains. Mountains, good. And what I'm doing right now, where I'm focused, is up here on my Kerbal Engineer readout, showing me what biome I am flying over. That is absolutely invaluable. That information right there, like my apoapsis height, my biome, and my situation. Those three things are the whole reason I use that mod. All the rest of this stuff is just extra nice to have. But those three bits of information really are the essentials. Everything else is so much easier if you've got that. Keeping an eye out for tundra. Maybe down here we might get some tundra, but I'm thinking it's probably going to go straight to polar cap. If memory serves, most of the tundra is right around the northern polar cap. Oh, 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 oh. Ugh. Missed it again. The tundra is another one. It's a tough biome because it's very small. It's in a weird spot, and if you miss it, then, you know, I mean, you miss it. You got to go around again. Of course, you know, you can use the cheat to show biomes, but I'm trying not to do that. All right, and that should be great. So desert would be down over. All right, so I don't think we're going to get the desert or anything. So we'll do another orbit over to the day side. All right, now we're going to keep an eye out for some tundra, just in case. Missed it again. The elusive tundra biome. Skipped it, went straight to water. Alright, is this going to get me over any desert or anything? It is not. Alright, so nothing super interesting on this orbit. Unless maybe we get lucky down here with a little bit of tundra. Nope. Whoa. Alright, went around a couple of times, a little bit too quick. It's okay, though. On this orbit, we'll get some desert. Ah! Oh. Jeez, I hit the wrong warp button. Missed the whole thing. That's what happens when you fat finger the time warp. Well, on the upside, we might be able to get some Badlands. Yes. Let's move quickly. EVA above the Badlands. Okay. And at this point, if I can just get the desert, I'm gonna call it a victory. I'm not gonna... Oh, jeez, and I did it again. As soon as I can get the desert, I'm gonna call it a win. I'm not gonna keep going for the tundra this time. All right, next orbit. I am useless. Why can I not get the desert? It's just eluding me. I promise I don't normally suck this bad. There. Do it the safe way. All right, desert, space low, EVA. Good. All right, good. Calling that a win. All right, so let me get over here. You know what we'll do? Just for fun, We'll see about landing up in the polar caps. Just cause. Alright, we'll see where that takes us. Well, alright, yeah, that might be a little shy of the polar caps, but that's fine. Not a big deal. It'll still be a good, safe landing, and that's what matters most. Oh, and you know what? We'll test. Yep. Our hotkey pulled all those EVA reports into our science container. So we're good there. Good there. And again, you know, using a shallow re-entry profile like this, I mean, like no ablator at all is used. Not even going to pull in like a third of it. So it makes a difference. Makes a difference. Alright, looks like we're probably going to come in over the water. That's fine. F5 for parachute safety. Yeah, we're pitch black right now, but that's okay. There's land. Yeah, we're out in the middle of nowhere. And we'll cut one of our chutes just to speed our descent a little bit. Because we're very safe right now. This is fine. And so the next step, after I recover this mission, this is when things get a little fun. Come on. Alright, we've got all of our level 90, so nothing to do there. Let's check for any additional science. Alright, we're not going to bother with rock arches. I may even just take this contract and auto-complete it just to get it off the list, even though it's a minor cheat, because that is a lot of money. Science from space around the moon. Not going to bother with any of these. Not yet. Bring Moonstone. Not yet. Alright, so looks like that's probably what we're going to do. We got plant flags, space around the moon. Those are good for stuff. So now we're going to design, using the Zenithar capsule as our basis, we are going to design a direct descent mission profile. So whoop, that's not the one we want. Okay. So this will will very easily get us back from the moon. Now we're just going to pop on. There we go. Alright, so now this is where one of the other custom parts I use comes into play. These payload fairings. I grabbed these from a parts mod, I think it's SXT. I use those pretty often. Sometimes I also use this science module, because you can do that. But, well, yeah, but for right now, I'm going to stick with the science module here. And do some of this. And we're going to do a little bit of parts clipping. Okay, that's actually a lot of parts clipping, but that's fine. So that'll be our landing stage. So let's get Group 2 is going to toggle bay doors. So this is going to be our Magnus 2 mission. And from here, we'll make sure that all this science is readily accessible from the top. Or from the front with the door open, I meant to say. Sorry about that. And we'll even do a magnetometer boom, because that is a thing now. And that'll be something we can collect from space around the moon. Alright, I think, yeah, that's all of our science for right now. That's good. Now, okay, that'll work out well. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because we don't have the large landing legs yet. So, it gets a little rough. Little rough landing with that. No, you know what? I'm just gonna... I was gonna try and angle those a little bit, but I'm not gonna bother. I'm just gonna do it like that. Normally, I like to use the longer landing legs, but for right now, not really a whole lot of choice. And let's get some lights. It's not going to cooperate with me. Alright, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Now we'll just... Alright, there we go. There's what I wanted for lights. Alright, get some more electricity. And just for a little bit of extra good measure, we're going to use a couple of extra solar panels. Never hurts to be a tiny bit safe on that. And we're also going to go with a little beefier RCS up there for our control up top. And internally, we are going to hide some additional fuel tanks. We're totally going to cheat and clip those in. Whoops. Alright, here is our direct ascent moon vehicle. So I need to get this into low orbit around the moon. So we're going to get some struts going. I do unshrouded open designs like this fairly often, and it's always important to build yourself like a little truss structure out of struts, just to give some extra stability into that joint. Okay, so here is where things get a little interesting. Not quite going to fit inside of the payload fairing. I was afraid of that. I hate having to do this. I really don't like having to do it like that, but we're just a little bit too wide. So we have to go with what we can. And from here, get our Poodle engine going. So this will give us our little bit of a descent stage there. Whoops. This will be a bit of a trans stage. Well, no, you know what? We can live a little bit on the wild side. We can use our trans stage. We'll go with a skipper. And we'll use our trans stage as a bit of a descent stage. So that'll be spicy. And do we have the mainsail? Yes, we do. Alright, and I'm going to want... Oh, well, before that, what was I thinking? We're going to clip in some control surfaces for extra safety. And so now, we're going to go with some relatively jumbo-sized solid rocket boosters to give us that extra bit of oomph. Now, these things provide a ridiculous amount of power. So, if we are lucky... Oh. It would help if I put them on right. Much better. Okay. And we're going to auto-strut those to our grandparent part. Now, this is important. We're going to do some Sepratron stuff with the decoupling. And the idea here is literally just to pull these away from the rest of the stack. Okay. So if we're lucky, this will be our moon rocket. And we've been going for a while, so I'm going to call this an episode. So make sure you check out the next one, where we try out our Magnus 2 design with our direct ascent mission, and see what happens. So as always, thanks for watching.